What's up Laravel developers, it's Dari here and I hope that you're having a great day. Now that we just finished the Laravel API course, I thought it might be good to dive into authentication and mailing in Laravel. This is a pretty big step forward if you think about the projects that you can build in Laravel. If we take an e-commerce as an example, you offer products to the customer and let's say that they can also subscribe to your newsletter. If they want to order a product, they need to be authenticated since you need their personal information. And if you want to send them a notification or an email of their order, you obviously need mailing. Now before I continue on with the video, I want to quickly let you know that you can support the channel through Patreon, which is linked in the description down below. You get pretty cool benefits such as a private Discord group where everyone is helping each other out, and you can decide the next video series that I'm going to make through the polls. So if you're interested to join, the link is down in the description. When I created my Laravel for Beginners series, which is also linked in the description down below, I added a chapter at the end of the course about authentication and authorization, not knowing that you could make an entire course about it. I want to cut all the small talk and introduction videos and how to set up a project, and I actually want to dive right into the code. Now I have a folder on my desktop where I store my Laravel projects called Workspace. But I also created a shortcut command called cdw, which will change directories to the workspace. So let's hit enter. Now we're inside my workspace, as you can see right here. And I obviously need a new Laravel project. So let's write down Laravel, new, Auth app. Let's hit enter. And this might take a second, so pause the video and I'll see you back in a second. The folder has been created, so let's change directories inside our project. So cd Auth app, hit enter. Inside our Auth app, we need to add Laravel's UI through Composer. So let's perform Composer require Laravel /UI space --dev. Hit enter. Alright, this was pretty fast. For this course, we obviously need to pull in the Authentication Scaffolding. So let's perform php artisan UI view space --auth. Hit enter. And it's asking us to run npm install and npm run dev. So let's copy it. Paste it. Hit enter. And this will probably run into an error of Laravel mix. Let's perform npm audit fix --force. And now let's run npm run watch. And as you can see, it's compiling as well. So we just fixed that. Now before I dive into my project, I want to show you which versions I'm using for this project. As you can see, we run npm run watch, so we need to open a new tab. I can do that by pressing Ctrl or Command T. Let me zoom in. cdw again. cd into Auth app. And in here, let's perform php artisan space --version. And as you can see, I'm using Laravel's framework of 8.38.0. To be honest, the versions from 8.0 until this one won't make a big difference. The issue comes into play if you're using older versions such as Laravel 5 or 6. Now to also check out our npm version, let's write down npm space -v. And as you can see, the npm version is 6.14.11. Whether you got experience in a different programming language than PHP or Laravel, you probably know that creating an application with login and register sessions, password resets, remember me access permissions can be, well, pretty time consuming. And one of the reasons I started using Laravel is honestly to save myself some time when working on projects. So right now, it's finally time to dive into our code editor. So let's open Visual Studio Code and let's open our workspace as well. I need to drag down my Visual Studio Code. Alright, so in our workspace, let's drag Auth app into the code editor. Let's close off the folder because we don't need it. Let's make it bigger and let's also zoom in. Let's close off the welcome screen. Now, using a framework like Laravel can also have its downsides. And yes, it does. And it's even coming from me. Since everything is so easy to go and the documentation on Laravel is very good, most people completely forget how the flow works. And that's what I want to show you in this video. Every Laravel project comes with its own user stable, migration and user model, which you probably have seen when you migrated your fresh project for the first time. So let me show that to you. If we open database, there's a folder called migrations. And let me make this a little bit bigger. You can see that we have 3 migrations: to create user stable, create password resets, and create file jobs. Now the one that we need is the first one, so to create users table. Let me make it smaller again. And IntelliSense updated to, well, let's say dismiss. All right, let me scroll down. Right here, you can see that a user has a unique ID, name, email, and an email verified at, which is a timestamp. A string, so for the password, the remember token, and the timestamps. Now, whenever you migrate this file, it will be used with the user model. So let's open that one right now. Let's open app, models, user.php. Looking at this file, you usually won't touch it a lot. You can see that the namespace is obviously app/models. It has some use statements, as you can see right here. It has a class name. It has two use statements inside the class, which I will cover in a bit. And it has two properties. The first one is called fillable, and the second one is called hidden. Whenever you're using the fillable property, you're basically telling the application, well, whenever you want to create a new user, at least the name, email, and the password needs to be filled in. And for the password and remember token, exclude them because they don't need to be shown to the user. And honestly, that's right, isn't it? Why would you want to get one of those values and print them out for a developer? There's actually not a legitimate reason for it. Probably to see if your password is encrypted, but that could also be done through MySQL. There's a property called cast, which will cast the email verified at to the date time. I skipped the most important word right here. Well, actually the most important words. So let's go at the top. And as you can see, our class user extends the authenticatable. So I'm on a Mac and I have PHP IntelliSense installed, which allows me to click through on a word. The way you do that is by clicking on Alt and clicking on the word that you want to click through. Now in our case, it's authenticatable. So let's do that. In here, you can see the entire path. So it's in the vendor directory, folder called Laravel, and so on until the file user.php. You can see that the class extends the model, which is the default model, and it also implements three other files. The first one is the authenticatable contract. And this is something which is called a contract, as the name implies. This will require methods that will then allow the framework to authenticate instances of this model to the auth system. We have the authorizable contract, and if you have used Laravel before, you know that there's a can method which will allow the framework to authorize instances of this model for their access permissions in different contracts. The last one is the can reset password contract, which will basically allow you to reset the password of any entity. Whenever you pull in the authentication scaffolding, you also pull in some controllers. So let's go at the top of our page, open HTTP, controllers, the auth folder. Now to show you this example or the controllers, we need to go back to the terminal and in here perform php artisan serve. And the reason why I'm doing this is so I can show you the files that we're working with. Now as you can see, it generated a URL for us, so let's copy it. Let's open a new tab for the browser. Let's paste it in. And let me zoom in a little bit. All right. Now let's hop back to the CLI one more time because I want to show you all the routes that we got. And in order to do that, we need to open a new tab again. I need to zoom in and let's go to the right folder. All right. And in here, let's perform php artisan route list. And let me zoom out for this one. Whenever you pull in the authentication scaffolding, you will see a total of 14 routes right here. And almost all of them are related to the authentication scaffolding. Now a cool thing is that the authentication scaffolding will automatically pull in a home controller. So let me show that to you. Right here, it has a home controller in the controllers folder. And as you can see inside our URI, we have a home page, which will go to the home controller and it searches for a method called index. Besides that, we have a login screen, show the login form. And something that might be weird for you is that we basically have two login forms. So the get head and the post. The get method is basically to show the page and the post method is to submit the form. We have a logout page, the password confirm, the password email reset, and the register page. Now one thing that you might have seen is that all these files that you can see right here go through the Auth folder. So every single page right here is using the Auth folder. And this is actually the reason why I showed you the routes, since that's the first place we need to look. So let's go back to Visual Studio Code. In here, you can see that we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 controllers that are related to authentication. I want to go over these controllers in a logical order. So whenever you start a new application, you need to register first. So let's open that one. So the register controller. What I want to do is to actually register an account and show you the different things that happen inside the controller. But before we do that, we need to set up our database. So let's open our .env file. Let me close off the vendor. I need to change my host to localhost. The port is alright, the database is alright, and I am using a password of Dari1234. Save it and close off the file. Let's open the register controller again. Let's go to MySQL. Now what we actually could do is to open a new tab and write down, well, zoom in, write down MySQL. We need to create a new database, so let's perform create database auth app and hit enter, and you can see that one row has been added. Now let's go back to the previous tab that we had. In here we need to run php artisan migrate, and let me zoom in as well. Right now we are ready to continue on with our controller. I won't be going over the use statements, namespaces and class because it's pretty straightforward. It's something that you already need to know. But the one thing that I skipped inside the model was the use statements. Now these look like a use statement, but they are actually called different. These use statements inside a controller class are called traits, and this trait will be called when the controller is being called. Now if we scroll down, you can see that we have a property right here called redirected to. And this is actually pretty important. To showcase what this does, I want to go to the browser, click on register inside the top right corner, create a new account. So let's say code with Dari, password is info, password is something secret. All right, if we click on register right here, you can see that the register process went pretty fine, but we have been redirected to /home. And this is being done inside the redirected to property of the controller. As you can see, it's calling the route service provider, home. What is home? If we press on Alt and click on route service provider, scroll down, you can basically see a constant here called home. And this is going to an endpoint of /home. And if we double check it inside the browser, you can see that our endpoint is /home. Obviously, we can easily create a new endpoint. So let's do that. Let's go right below our constant home, create a public constant test, and let's set it equal to /test. Save it, go back to our register controller, and let's replace home with the constant that we have called test. Let's save it, let's go back to the browser, let's click on our name, log out, and let's register one more time. Name is test, password is test, add code with Dari. Let's add a password. Click on register. And as you could see, it redirected us to /test, and the status code is a 404 because the page has not been found. Now let's go back to Visual Studio Code. Let's change it back to home. And let's continue on. As you can see, our controller is using a constructor. So whenever a user tries to hit the register controller, it will look if a person is logged in or not through the middleware. There is a validator and a create method. The validator method will basically define how to validate registrations. So if you like to change some rules, say that you want to change the password minimum characters to, let's say 12, you can easily change it right here. Now the last method is the create method, which will define how to create a new user based on the incoming registration, which is the variable data. Whenever you register, you will log in automatically, just like I showed you a minute ago. But let's see how the login controller works. So let's open it. If we scroll down, you can see that the login controller is using one trait called authenticates users, which will bring in the redirected users. It also has its own property of redirect to, which is heading the home constant, but you can change this one as well. Now there's one method inside the login controller, and that's the constructor. So whenever the login controller is being called, it looks if the guest already exists. So inside the session, and then it will show you the logout button. Now I can go over the confirm password, forgot password, reset password and verification controller. But if you scroll through it, let's just open one. You must have a clear understanding of what is going on right here because it's pretty much the same. It's using crates, it has a redirect, and it has a constructor that might go through the middleware. Now the next step is the routes. So if we scroll down and open the web.php file inside the routes, scroll down, you can see that 3 routes are defined. But I actually want to focus on the auth : routes. Now what this basically does is showing all the endpoints that I just showed you in the CLI. You can obviously define all the routes by yourself, but think about it. If you have a resource for CRUD applications, why would there be a special type of route for all the different views that you have in the controller? It's so easy to just define a resource or a route. Now that I've talked about the controllers, model, routes and migrations, I think it's time to take it a step further by talking about the authentication scaffolding, since views are a very big part of it. It will take care of the routes inside the views of the resources folder. There's a folder called views, and in here you can see a auth folder. All these files and the layouts folder as well got automatically created when we run the php artisan make auth command. And all these files have a bootstrap based layout and all of the form fields are already correct. Now if we open the login blade file, we obviously have a form where we can log in. And I won't go over all of the stuff that we have right here, but I want to quickly show you something which is pretty important. If we scroll down to the bottom, you can see that we have a label and an input right here. And this is basically the remember me checkbox that we have inside our view. Let me show that to you. Change the endpoints to /login. Oh, we're logged in. Let's log out. Let's click on login. And as you can see right here, we have a remember me checkbox. Now this is pretty much the place where we process the remember me checkbox that you can see in the UI. This remember me function does not work out of the box since you need a long life access token inside your database. So let's go to the CLI. Let's go to the MySQL tab and let's use auth app. Now let's desk the table users. And as you can see right here, we have a remember token column, which can be null. Now if we select everything from the table users, let me zoom out. All right, you can see that the remember token of code with Dari and test are actually both null. And this is happening because I've never clicked on the input field. When you usually log in without a remember token. But whenever you click on the remember me checkbox, a boolean will be passed as a true to the auth attempt method. So where can we find this method? Let's go back to Visual Studio Code. Let's go to the login controller and let's click true on authenticate user. Now, if you scroll down, you can see that we have a method somewhere right here called attempt login. You can see that we are going to check if a remember input field has been filled, and this will return a boolean. Now, if we go back to the browser, let's log in with info@darinazar. Let's click on the remember me checkbox, click on login. You can see that we are indeed logged in. And if we go back to the database, select everything from users again, you can see that a long life token has been created for code with Dari. If we close off the browser, open it one more time, let me make it full screen, and let's go to the right endpoint. You can see that we are indeed logged in because we cannot see the login and register button. Now the next thing that I want to talk about is the Auth Middleware. And I actually have talked about it before, but not really in depth. A lot of places in our application, let's open Visual Studio Code and let's go to the login controller. Let's go to the constructor. All right. A lot of places in our application, we have been using the middleware. And as you can see, it accepts a string called guest. Now, how does this work? If you want to perform checks to see if a user is logged in or not, you will usually do that through the middleware. Now Laravel uses a route middleware where some very important routes are defined. And these can be found inside the app folder, HTTP, and there's a file called kernel.php. If we scroll down to the bottom, you can see that we have a property called route middleware. And if you look at the names, you can see a couple files that are related to authentication. The first one is obviously auth, and this is used to restrict route access to authenticated users. We have the auth.basic, we have the guest right here, which will restrict access to unauthenticated users. And the last one is the can right above. And this is used for authorizing user access to given routes. Now this was it for this video about how authentication works on Laravel. If you do like my content and you want to see more, leave this video a thumbs up. And if you're new to this channel, please hit that subscribe button.